The icy gale of the Texas blizzard howled against the garage door, but inside the dark hallway, the silence cut far deeper. Ethan's voice was flat, hard, and final. "Take your bag and get out, Hannah. Tonight." 6 years of marriage. 6 years of cooking every meal, scrubbing every floor, and swallowing every insult. Gone in 6 seconds. The ring light on the front door camera blinked a cold blue. On screen, a half-frozen stranger stood shivering under the porch light, holding a bleeding forehead and a crumpled paper bag. Beside Hannah, her sister-in-law Chloe tapped her acrylic nails against her phone, not looking up. Her mother-in-law, Olivia, folded her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line. Nobody moved to stop him. Nobody said her name. To understand how a dedicated wife ended up cast into a freezing blizzard on a Tuesday night, we have to rewind to 4 hours before the storm broke. The afternoon started with the suffocating smell of bleach and roasted rosemary. By 5 o'clock, the sky over Houston turned bruised purple. Inside the Vance home, the air felt heavy. Hannah's hands were red from scrubbing granite. The chemical sting of cleaner clung to her skin, mixed with the scent of garlic chicken in the oven. Ethan walked into the kitchen, eyes glued to his phone, and set his empty mug on the counter. "The downstairs bathroom needs paper towels," he said without warmth. "I replaced them an hour ago, Ethan," Hannah said quietly. Ethan ignored her and sat at the dining table. That was his favorite weapon, the cold shoulder. For 2 years, Ethan had mastered making Hannah feel like a ghost in her own home. When angry, he erased her. He stopped answering her questions. He stopped looking her in the eye. A few minutes later, Olivia and Chloe walked in. Chloe dropped her designer bag onto the island with a loud thud. "I'm starving," Chloe groaned. "Is dinner ready? I have an online sale at 6. "It's almost ready, Chloe," Hannah said softly. Olivia sat down, smoothing her blouse. Her eyes narrowed at a watermark on Ethan's glass. She wiped it off with a napkin and a heavy sigh. "A real home requires attention to detail, Hannah," Olivia remarked dryly. "Ethan works 40 hours a week closing property deals. The least he deserves is a spotless table." Hannah swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to mention her shift at the dried flower warehouse today, lifting heavy crates before coming home to cook. But she kept quiet. Defending herself only lengthened Ethan's silence. The storm hit at 7. Heavy snow slammed against the windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low metallic growl shaking the glass. Suddenly, the house chimes sounded. The smart doorbell display lit up. Ethan frowned at the screen. The camera showed a tall man standing under the porch light. His jacket was torn, soaked with icy rain. Blood, mixed with snow, trickled down his temple. His boots were caked in mud. He held a wet plastic bag, trembling in the wind. "Get away from the door." Ethan snapped into the intercom. "We have cameras. I am calling the police." Through the speaker, the man's raspy voice came through. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir. My truck slid off the creek bridge. My phone is dead. I just need to call a tow truck." "Not my problem, buddy," Ethan scoffed. "Get off my property before 911 gets here." He muted the screen. Hannah stared at the monitor. She saw the man's calloused, shaking hands. He looked exhausted. Without a word, Hannah walked down the back hallway toward the garage. She grabbed an old wool blanket, medical tape, and a container of hot chicken broth. She opened the garage side door a few inches. Freezing air slapped her face like a wet towel. "Sir," she called out quietly. The man turned. His dark eyes met hers through the snow. "Take this," Hannah whispered, pushing the blanket, broth, and bandage through the gap. "There is a shelter 2 blocks south." The man looked at the warm container, then up at Hannah. "Thank you," he rasped. Everyone deserves to be warm, Hannah said gently. What do you think you are doing? The garage door yanked wide open. Ethan stood there, his face red with fury. Behind him, Olivia and Chloe watched with cold, mocking expressions. You're giving our food to a random street beggar? Ethan shouted. You disobey me in my own house. Ethan, he was bleeding, Hannah tried to explain. I don't care. Ethan yelled. You make this family uncomfortable, every day. The strangers stepped back into the snow. I will go. Please don't argue on my account. Ethan ignored him and locked eyes with Hannah. His years of silent resentment boiled over. Since you care so much about trash, go join him, Ethan said, his voice dropping into an icy register. Pack your things. Get out of my house. The garage went dead silent. Hannah looked at Olivia, who crossed her arms and looked away. She looked at Chloe, who let out a quiet, sarcastic snort. Nobody defended her. Nobody said, Ethan, stop. Something inside Hannah snapped quietly, like a dry twig underfoot. The years of trying to earn love from people who refused to give it were over. Fine, Hannah said softly. She walked upstairs to the guest bedroom. She packed 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, her work boots, and a worn notebook filled with handwritten supply chain diagrams. The life's work of her late father, Thomas. 5 years of marriage reduced to 20 pounds of vinyl and paper. She walked downstairs. Ethan stood by the entrance, his arms folded. Hannah did not look at him. She pulled her coat over her shoulders, grabbed her suitcase, and opened the front door. The Texas blizzard hit her face with brutal force, but as the heavy door clicked shut behind her, Hannah took her first deep breath in 6 years. The freezing wind bit through Hannah's wool coat as she dragged her suitcase along the deserted sidewalk. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes, blurring the amber glow of the streetlights. 3 blocks from the Vance house, her strength gave out. Her hand slipped from the icy handle, and the suitcase tumbled into a snowbank with a dull thud. Hannah sat on the cold wooden bench of a bus shelter. Her body trembled from a deep, aching exhaustion. A soft crunch of footsteps sounded in the fresh snow. Hannah flinched, pulling her collar tight. Through the veil of falling white, a tall figure emerged. It was the stranger from the porch. His forehead was freshly bandaged, and he wore his torn jacket zipped up to his chin. In his calloused hand, he held 2 paper cups, steam rising into the freezing air. He did not ask if she was okay. He sat at the far end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance, and extended a cup toward her. Black coffee, he said. His voice was raspy, grounded, and calm. It's hot. Hannah took it with numb fingers. The paper burned her palms, bringing a sharp, grounding sensation back to her skin. The bitter aroma of roasted coffee beans cut through the sterile scent of falling snow. As warmth spread into her chest, something inside Hannah cracked open. A hot tear spilled over her eyelashes, melting the frost on her cheek. Within seconds, quiet sobs racked her shoulders. She wasn't crying because she had no bed tonight. She was crying because for 6 years she had erased her identity, starving her soul, trying to buy affection from people who treated her like dust. The stranger stayed silent. He sat in the dark, an anchor against the storm, sipping coffee while the wind howled around the shelter. After 10 minutes, Hannah wiped her face. You didn't have to follow me, she whispered. I know, he replied. My truck is parked near the service station down the street. I saw you walk out with a suitcase. Why did you stay? He looked at her, his expression steady. Because an hour ago, a woman offered hot food and a bandage to a man everyone else called trash. You didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain. Kindness like that is rare. He stood up and picked up her suitcase. There's a clean motel across the road. Let me get you inside before your feet freeze. The lobby of the roadside motel smelled of pine cleaner and old carpet. Warm air hit Hannah's face like a wall. The receptionist slid a key card across the counter after the stranger quietly tapped his credit card against the reader. Hannah shrank back, her cheeks flushing red. "I can't afford this room right now. My bank account is joint with Ethan. I need to pay you back." The stranger smiled softly. "You don't owe me anything. Tonight, you gave warmth to a stranger. Tonight, you deserve to feel safe." He handed her the key card. "Get some sleep. I'll check on you in the morning." "I don't even know your name," Hannah realized softly. "Caleb," he said. "Caleb Reynolds." The morning sun broke through the storm clouds at 7, casting pale gold light across the snow-covered parking lot. A quiet knock echoed at the door. Hannah opened it to find Caleb standing in the doorway, holding a paper bag filled with hot breakfast tacos and fresh orange juice. The scent of toasted tortillas filled the room. They sat at the small round table near the window. For the first time in years, Hannah ate without someone watching her every bite, without waiting for criticism. As they ate, Caleb asked simple questions. Not about her marriage, but about her. Hannah found herself opening up. She spoke about her job at the dried flower warehouse, how she organized inventory, mapped out delivery routes, and streamlined packing to save 3 hours every afternoon. Her voice grew steady, her eyes lighting up as she explained her passion for logistics. "You really understand systems," Caleb observed. Hannah pulled the worn, leather-bound notebook from her handbag. "My father, Thomas, was a warehouse foreman for 30 years, she said softly, tracing the faded golden letters on the cover. "He wrote down every layout strategy he learned. I studied this book every night." Caleb leaned forward. "May I?" Hannah pushed the notebook across the table. Caleb flipped through the yellowed pages. His eyes scanned the hand-drawn flowcharts, mathematical equations for inventory turnover, and margin notes written in Hannah's neat handwriting. As founder and CEO of Reynolds Logistics, a freight company managing thousands of trucks nationwide, Caleb recognized genius immediately. The diagrams weren't just old notes. They were brilliant supply chain optimizations. Caleb closed the book gently. "My company is opening a new distribution hub in North Houston next week. We are hiring. I need people who see order where everyone else sees chaos." Hannah blinked, stunned. "A job? At a freight company?" "Starting as a warehouse intern," Caleb said, his voice completely serious. "Minimum wage to start, but real room to grow based on merit. No favors, just your own hard work." Hannah looked at her hands. They were calloused, strong, and capable. For 6 years, Ethan had told her she was useless without his income. Something shifted deep in Hannah's chest, a quiet, powerful click. She took the notebook back, holding it firmly against her heart. "When do I start?" she asked. Caleb smiled. "Monday, 6 in the morning." After Caleb left, Hannah walked over to the bathroom mirror. The steam from her shower had fogged the glass. She wiped a clear circle with her palm and stared at her reflection. Her eyes were red, but the fear was gone. In its place was a quiet, burning resolve. Hannah squared her shoulders and looked herself dead in the eye. "From today on," she whispered aloud, "I will never let anyone make me feel invisible again." The sharp, metallic scent of diesel fumes and fresh cardboard filled the massive warehouse in North Houston. Overhead, bright LED bay lights flickered to life with a loud buzz, illuminating endless rows of steel shelving that stretched 40 feet into the air. The rumble of idling semi-trucks vibrated through the thick concrete floor. At 6 in the morning, Hannah stood at the edge of the loading dock. She wore a high-visibility yellow vest over a plain black shirt, steel-toed work boots, and fitted jeans. Her hands, once soft from dish soap and furniture polish, were wrapped tightly around a digital barcode scanner. She wasn't an executive. She was a warehouse intern, earning minimum wage. For the first month, the physical toll was brutal. Heavy, wooden pallets groaned under her boots. Sharp wooden splinters pricked through her leather gloves. Her back throbbed with a dull, constant ache as she lugged heavy crates of automotive parts and industrial valves across concrete floors. In her small studio apartment, Hannah tracked every single dollar. She cooked simple meals of rice, black beans, and grilled chicken. She canceled unnecessary subscriptions and budgeted for her monthly bus pass down to the cent. She spent her nights at her small kitchen table, studying Apic's supply chain management textbooks until her eyes stung with fatigue. When memories of Ethan's cold silences or Olivia's sharp insults crept into her mind, Hannah did not cry. She opened her father's leather notebook instead. She channeled her pain into cold, disciplined focus. She learned to view her past not as a tragedy, but as a lesson in survival. By month 3, Hannah noticed a massive flaw in Distribution Hub 4. Yellow forklifts were constantly crisscrossing paths, creating dangerous traffic jams near the main loading bays. Workers spent up to 20 minutes searching for high-demand items stored in the back corners of the facility. During her 30-minute lunch breaks, Hannah sat in the noisy break room with a ruler and grid paper. She mapped out a new inventory layout based on her father's ABC analysis strategy, placing fast-moving goods near the front dock and slow-moving industrial parts in the upper racks. She presented her handwritten proposal to the warehouse manager, a grizzled veteran named Marcus. Marcus stared at the precise hand-drawn diagram, then looked up at Hannah. "You came up with this on your lunch breaks. It cuts unnecessary forklift travel by 30%, Hannah said, her voice steady and clear. It saves roughly 2 hours of labor per shift. Marcus implemented the test layout the following Monday. By Friday, the hub's processing time dropped by 22%. Within 6 months, Hannah was promoted from intern to inventory lead. She didn't just change her career. She transformed herself from the inside out. Hannah traded her oversized, faded sweaters for tailored blazers and crisp button-down shirts. She cut her hair into a sharp, elegant shoulder-length bob that framed her face. She stood taller, her shoulders back, her voice firm and articulate in every meeting. She learned to manage her finances with precision, building a 6-month emergency fund and investing in professional attire. She learned to handle workplace conflict calmly. When a driver yelled about a delayed shipment, Hannah did not shrink back as she used to when Ethan raised his voice. She looked the driver straight in the eye, reviewed the digital manifest, and resolved the issue in under 3 minutes with icy professionalism. 1 year later, the executive board at Reynolds Logistics took notice. During the annual logistics review, CEO Caleb Reynolds stood before the department heads in the glass-walled boardroom. He displayed a digital chart showing distribution, Hub 4, leading the entire southern region in efficiency and safety. Nights, weekends, and relentless dedication, Caleb told the room. The credit for this restructuring goes to Hannah Miller. Applause echoed through the glass-walled room. Hannah stood up, wearing a fitted charcoal blazer. She accepted the applause with a calm, graceful smile. There was no arrogance in her eyes, only the quiet pride of a woman who had built her own foundation brick by brick. That afternoon, Caleb handed her an official letter stamped with the corporate seal. Regional Supply Chain Manager. Hannah read aloud, her fingers tracing the embossed gold lettering. Her salary tripled. She was now overseeing 5 major distribution hubs across Texas. "You earned every inch of this, Hannah," Caleb said softly, looking at her with deep respect. "No favors, just your own hard work." "Thank you, Caleb," she said. Her voice was grounded and steady. She walked out onto the executive balcony, overlooking the Houston skyline. The warm Texas breeze brushed against her face, carrying the scent of rain and wet pine. She pulled out her phone and checked the corporate bidding portal. A new notification flashed on her screen. Reynolds Logistics opens bidding for multi-million-dollar Texas freight expansion. Hannah scrolled down to the list of applicant real estate firms seeking a subcontract. Right near the middle of the list was a familiar name: Vance Real Estate and Commercial Storage. Her former husband, Ethan Vance, was bidding for a contract under her department. Hannah closed the app, slipped her phone into her blazer pocket, and looked out over the glowing city lights. A cold, knowing smile touched her lips. Her heart didn't beat faster. Her hands didn't shake. The timid woman who had fled into the snow 2 years ago was gone. Standing in her place was a leader who held the future in her hands. Inside the 2-story brick home on Elm Street, the silence felt stifling, heavy, and sour. 18 months after Hannah stepped out into the blizzard, the Vance house was falling apart at the seams. Without Hannah to cook, clean, and manage the household budget, the warm, immaculate home had vanished. The kitchen counter was cluttered with sticky coffee rings, unwashed dishes, and takeaway cardboard boxes. The sharp, nauseating smell of sour milk and stale grease hung heavy in the air. Flies buzzed near the sink, where dirty water pooled around grease-coated pans. At the dining table, Ethan Vance stared intently at his laptop screen. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt collar unbuttoned, and his dark hair uncombed. The real estate market had crashed 6 months ago. His commission checks had completely dried up, and his bank account was hemorrhaging cash every single day. Beside him, his mother, Olivia, sat in her faded bathrobe, clutching a stack of unpaid utility bills. Her once neat hair was graying at the roots, and deep lines of stress were carved into her forehead. The electric company sent a final disconnection notice. "Ethan," Olivia rasped, her voice trembling with anxiety. "And the Homeowners Association is fining us for the overgrown lawn. Where is the money?" "I'm working on it, Mom." Ethan snapped, slamming his open palm onto the mahogany table. The sudden bang rattled the cold coffee mugs. "Do you think selling houses in this crashing economy is easy?" From the hallway, Chloe walked in, dragging her feet in an old t-shirt and gray sweatpants. Her designer leather bags, once her pride and joy, were gone, sold online at a steep loss to pay off her mounting credit card debt. "I need gas money, Ethan," Chloe whined, throwing herself onto the leather sofa. "And my car insurance is due tomorrow morning." "I don't have it, Chloe." Ethan yelled back, his face flushing red with anger. "Find a job and pay for your own life." "I've been applying for months." Chloe shouted back, tears of frustration swelling in her eyes. "Nobody is hiring." Olivia let out a bitter sigh, staring up at the dusty chandelier overhead. When Hannah was here, the bills were always paid on time. The fridge was always full. The house was spotless. We never had to worry about these things. "Don't mention her name," Ethan barked, but deep down, a cold knot of regret twisted in his stomach. He remembered how effortless Hannah had made everything look. He had thought her work was trivial, easily replaceable. Now, facing dirty laundry, spoiled food, and mounting debt, Ethan realized that Hannah had been the invisible pillar holding his entire life together. He missed the quiet order she brought to his days, though his pride refused to let him admit it. Ethan turned back to his laptop. He had one last desperate card to play. 6 months ago, he had pivoted into commercial real estate and storage management, forming a small subcontracting firm, Vance Real Estate and Commercial Storage. He had leveraged his last remaining assets to bid for a lucrative subcontract with Reynolds Logistics, the largest freight and supply chain empire in Texas. Winning this contract meant a $2 million payout. It was his ticket out of financial ruin. It would pay off his debts, restore his reputation, and save his home from foreclosure. Ethan spent 3 sleepless nights inflating his firm's financial capacity, forging performance metrics, and faking asset reports in the bidding dossier. He was convinced his sharp charm and polished sales pitch would easily win over the corporate board. Meanwhile, Chloe was facing her own humiliation. Desperate for an income, she had applied for an executive assistant position at Reynolds Logistics. On Thursday morning, she walked into the grand marble lobby of the corporate headquarters, wearing her last decent blazer. She felt confident. She had a college degree and believed her family background entitled her to a plush corporate desk. An hour later, Chloe sat across from a stern HR director in a glass-walled office. The director reviewed Chloe's file on a digital tablet, her expression turning icy cold. "Miss Vance, our automated background and ethics check flagged your application." Chloe blinked, her polite smile freezing. "What? There must be a mistake." "It's not a mistake," the director said flatly, turning the screen toward her. "Your previous employer noted multiple instances of workplace harassment, unexcused absences, and abusive behavior toward service staff. Reynolds Logistics has a strict zero-tolerance policy for toxic workplace conduct. Your application is rejected." Chloe stood up, her face burning with embarrassment, and stumbled out of the high-rise building into the humid afternoon air. Friday morning arrived, the day of the final bidding presentation. Ethan, dressed in his finest navy suit, polished his Oxford shoes until they gleamed, and smoothed his silk tie. He checked his reflection in the full-length mirror, flashing a confident, predatory smile. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "This contract changes everything." He grabbed his leather briefcase, stepped into his sedan, and drove toward the glass and steel skyscraper of Reynolds Logistics in downtown Houston. As he walked through the grand glass doors into the bustling lobby, Ethan felt a surge of pride. He adjusted his cufflinks, completely oblivious that the woman sitting at the head of the evaluation board was the same wife he had cast out into the freezing snow 2 years ago. The mahogany doors of executive boardroom swung open with a heavy, muffled click. Ethan Vance stepped inside, clutching his leather briefcase. The room smelled of polished cedar, rich espresso, and crisp air conditioning. A 30-foot glass wall overlooked the sprawling Houston skyline, bathed in sharp morning sunlight. Around the oval quartz table sat 8 senior executives, their faces cold, professional, and unreadable. Ethan smoothed his silk tie and flashed his most charming, confident smile. He walked toward the presenter's lectern, his leather shoes tapping sharply against the hardwood perimeter. "Good morning, members of the board," Ethan began, his voice smooth and projected. "I am Ethan Vance, founder and principal of Vance Real Estate and Commercial Storage. Today, I present a vision for your Texas expansion that guarantees efficiency, seamless integration, and unmatched local expertise." For 15 minutes, Ethan delivered a polished presentation. He clicked through his digital slides, showcasing glossy photos of storage facilities, projected profit margins, and inflated inventory capacity numbers. He felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. He was in his element. He was convincing. He was winning. In conclusion, Ethan said, clicking to his final slide, "Vance Real Estate offers the agility and commitment that a giant like Reynolds Logistics needs to dominate the southern corridor." He stepped back from the lectern, resting his hands on the mahogany wood, waiting for the nods of approval. At the head of the quartz table, the high-backed executive chair slowly rotated around. Ethan's smile froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. Sitting in the chair was a woman in an immaculate charcoal blazer. Her sharp bob framed a face he knew better than his own. Her eyes, once soft, tear-streaked, and desperate, were now cool, clear, and sharp as polished obsidian. On the nameplate before her, gold lettering caught the sunlight. Hannah Miller, Executive Director of Strategic Development. Ethan's hands began to tremble. His leather briefcase slipped an inch on the lectern. Hannah, he stammered, his polished composure shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces. What are you doing here? Silence fell over the room, heavy and suffocating. The other executives frowned, looking between Ethan and Hannah. Ethan's face flushed red with a sudden surge of humiliation and panic. His old, arrogant instincts flared up. "Is this some kind of joke?" he demanded, his voice cracking as he stepped toward the table. "You're a warehouse worker. Who allowed you into an executive meeting? Hannah, get out of that chair right now. We are in the middle of a multi-million-dollar corporate tender." "Mr. Vance," a stern voice cut through the air. Caleb Reynolds stepped out from the side observation gallery, dressed in a sharp dark suit. He walked calmly to the head of the table, standing right beside Hannah. He placed a steady hand on the back of her leather chair, his dark eyes locking onto Ethan with icy intensity. "You are addressing the executive director of strategic development for Reynolds Logistics," Caleb said, his voice quiet but carrying the force of a thunderclap. "Director Miller oversees all vendor selection, contract approvals, and supply chain expansion for the entire state of Texas. If you raise your voice at her again, security will escort you out of this building in handcuffs." Ethan gasped, his jaw dropping open. He stared at Caleb, then back at Hannah. The memory hit him like a physical blow, the bleeding stranger in the torn jacket standing under his porch light 2 years ago in the freezing blizzard. The man he had called a street beggar was Caleb Reynolds. Ethan's knees felt weak. He gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. You were the man from the storm," he whispered, horror dawning in his eyes. Hannah did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She opened a thick leather binder on the table, her manicured fingers turning the pages with calm, deliberate grace. "Let us review your proposal, Mr. Vance," Hannah said. Her tone was completely professional, utterly devoid of anger, bitterness, or warmth. It was the tone of a judge reading a verdict. She looked up, her gaze pinning Ethan to the floor. "On slide 4, you listed 3 commercial warehouses in East Houston with a combined capacity of 200,000 square feet. Hannah tapped her tablet screen, sending a document to the large display wall behind her. Public property records filed with Harris County show that 2 of those facilities were foreclosed on 3 weeks ago, Hannah stated flatly. The 3rd facility has a pending environmental lien and fails basic OSHA safety standards. Ethan's sweat broke out across his forehead, soaking his collar. Those are minor administrative delays. We are restructuring. Furthermore, Hannah interrupted calmly, flipping to the next page. Your audited financial statements claim a net operating liquidity of $1.5 million. However, our corporate compliance team cross-referenced your tax filings. Your firm is currently facing 3 active lawsuits for unpaid contractor fees and an impending bank foreclosure on your primary residence. The room grew colder. The senior executives shook their heads, making quick notes on their pads. You did not submit a business proposal, Mr. Vance, Hannah continued, her voice clear and resonant. You submitted a fraudulent document attempting to deceive this board and secure a corporate advance to cover your personal debts. Hannah, please. Ethan blurted out, dropping all pretense of professionalism. Sweat trickled down his temple, ruining his polished image. He stepped closer, his hands raised in desperate supplication. We were married for 6 years. We shared a life. You know me. I was under immense pressure. The real estate market crashed. My mother is sick, Chloe has no job, and we are losing the house. You can't do this to your family. Family? Hannah repeated softly. For the first time, she closed her binder. The sharp clack echoed through the silent room like a gavel. She looked at Ethan, not with hatred, not with revenge, but with complete, absolute detachment. 6 years ago, I entered your home and gave you everything I had, Hannah said quietly. I cooked your meals, cleaned your floors, and managed your life while you made me feel invisible. 2 years ago, when a bleeding man came to your door in a blizzard, I gave him a blanket and a cup of broth. You threw me out into a sub-zero storm with 20 pounds of clothes and told me I was trash. Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You didn't cast out a weak woman that night, Ethan, Hannah said, her voice rising with quiet, undeniable power. You freed me. You forced me to find my own strength, my own voice, and my own worth. I stand here today not because anyone gave me a gift, but because I worked 18 hours a day to build a life you could never touch. She picked up her pen and stamped a red seal onto his file. Vance Real Estate and Commercial Storage is permanently disqualified from bidding on all current and future contracts with Reynolds Logistics, Hannah declared. This board meeting is adjourned. Caleb pressed a button on the intercom console. Security, please escort Mr. Vance off the premises. Two tall, uniformed security officers stepped into the boardroom. They grabbed Ethan by his arms, forcing him away from the table. Hannah, no, please. Ethan cried out, his voice cracking as he was pulled toward the heavy mahogany doors. You can't do this. Give me another chance. Hannah. Ethan's polished Oxford shoes dragged uselessly against the hardwood floor. His briefcase fell open, spilling his forged paper slides across the pristine rug. The heavy doors closed behind him with a final, echoing thud, cutting off his desperate shouts forever. In the boardroom, the executives gathered their folders and walked out, leaving Hannah and Caleb alone near the glass wall. Hannah stood looking out over the city. Her breathing was steady. Her chest felt light. The heavy ghost of her past had finally dissolved into thin air. Caleb walked up beside her, offering a warm cup of coffee. Are you okay? Hannah took the cup, feeling the gentle warmth against her palms. She looked at Caleb, then out at the bright Texas sky. A genuine, radiant smile touched her lips. I have never been better, she whispered. 6 months after the fateful board meeting, a quiet afternoon sun bathed the oak-shaded patio of a small cafe in Houston. Hannah sat at a corner table, sipping a warm chamomile tea. She wore a simple cream-colored linen dress, her face soft, relaxed, and glowing with an easy peace. Across from her sat Ethan Vance. He looked hollowed out. His expensive designer suit was gone, replaced by a plain, slightly faded polo shirt. He sat with his calloused hands tucked between his knees, staring down at his paper water cup. His firm had gone completely bankrupt. His home was sold at a bank foreclosure auction. He was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment with Olivia and Chloe, working as an entry-level property inspector. I didn't think you'd come, Ethan said quietly, his voice raspy and humbled. I came because you asked, Hannah replied softly. Her tone was gentle, completely devoid of resentment, anger, or pride. Ethan swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly. My mother. She needed another procedure for her heart condition. The hospital bills were piling up fast. I didn't know where else to turn. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. Hannah opened her leather handbag, pulled out a check written from her personal charitable foundation, and slid it across the wooden table. This covers her medical care, Ethan, Hannah said. It is paid directly to the hospital foundation. You don't need to pay it back. Ethan stared at the check, tears swelling in his bloodshot eyes. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with quiet, racking sobs. Why are you doing this? After everything I did to you, after how cruel we were, why? Hannah looked at him with profound, unbroken calmness. I'm not doing this for you, Ethan, she said softly. I'm doing this because I refuse to let the bitterness of the past dictate who I am. I helped Olivia because she is a human being in need, not because I owe your family anything. We are completely square now. You don't owe me, and I don't owe you. She stood up, picked up her handbag, and looked down at him one last time. I forgive you, Ethan. I hope you find your peace. Without waiting for an answer, Hannah walked out into the warm afternoon light. Ethan watched her leave through the window, realizing that her true strength was never about getting revenge. It was about her complete, unbroken freedom. 1 year later, on a golden autumn afternoon, the vast oak pastures of a private ranch outside Hill Country, Texas, were filled with laughter and soft acoustic guitar music. White linen banners fluttered gently in the warm breeze. Friends, colleagues, and workers from Reynolds Logistics gathered around long cedar tables laden with grilled Texas barbecue, fresh peaches, and iced sweet tea. Underneath a grand canopy oak tree, Hannah and Caleb stood hand in hand. Hannah wore an elegant, understated white lace gown. Her eyes shone with a deep, quiet joy as she looked at Caleb. He wore a crisp dark suit, his eyes filled with steady, unconditional devotion. They exchanged simple, heartfelt vows, promising respect, partnership, and unconditional support. When Caleb kissed her under the green leaves, applause echoed across the open fields. There were no massive crowds of photographers, no corporate posturing, and no grand displays designed to impress strangers. It was a celebration of genuine love, built on a foundation of mutual trust and shared values. 2 years later, the late afternoon sun reached the golden hour, painting the rolling Texas hills in brilliant shades of amber, bronze, and molten gold. Hannah stood near the crest of the hill overlooking the peaceful ranch. The warm breeze carried the sweet, earthy scent of blooming bluebonnets and dry cedar wood. Caleb walked up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. In front of them, their 2-year-old son, Thomas, named after Hannah's late father, chased a golden retriever across the soft grass. His bright laughter rang out like silver bells across the quiet countryside. Thomas ran back to his parents, holding up a piece of drawing paper with a proud, beaming smile. His small hands were smudged with green and yellow crayon wax. "Mommy, Daddy, look," Thomas chirped, holding up the drawing. Caleb knelt down, taking the paper with a warm smile. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun, surrounded by big green trees. "This is beautiful, Tommy," Caleb said, ruffling his son's soft hair. "Why is everyone holding hands so tightly?" The little boy tilted his head, his dark eyes sparkling with innocent wisdom. "Because hands are for holding people together, Daddy, so nobody ever feels cold or alone." Caleb and Hannah looked at each other over their son's head. A deep, silent understanding passed between them. Caleb pulled Thomas up into his arms, squeezing his wife tight against his side. Hannah looked out over the vast, glowing horizon. She placed her hand over Caleb's, feeling the steady beat of his heart beside her own. She remembered the freezing blizzard, the cold garage door, and the heavy suitcase. She remembered the tears she had shed on that lonely bus shelter bench. None of those memories hurt anymore. They were simply the dark soil from which her beautiful, unshakable life had bloomed. She took a deep, peaceful breath of the warm evening air. She was no longer an invisible wife, a victim, or a survivor. She was complete. She was free. A quiet, radiant smile touched her lips as the golden sun dipped below the horizon, bathing her world in everlasting warmth. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.